Palin Watch. How many controversies can the governor's candidacy survive? As mayor, her police chief wanted to charge rape victims for their own rape kits. As governor, she charged the state per diem for every night she spent in her own home. And how many lies can the governor's candidacy survive? Brought back today on the campaign trail, the distortion in which she claimed she fired the governor's executive chef.
I thought it was important also as mayor and governor to try to lead by example. I cut the personal chef position from the budget, which didn't thrill my kids.
Except the governor didn't fire that chef. She simply reassigned her to a different job title while she continued to cook for the governor's kids. What exactly is the strategy here? And what exactly
so far indicates that Sarah Palin has been a huge boon to the McCain campaign, and the attention on Sarah Palin is not about to ease up, in part because of the controversy over her record and the controversy over what she is saying about that record. Twice today at two different events, Palin again portrayed herself as a reformer, and she said she opposed the biggest symbol of pork barrel spending. Watch.
I told Congress, thanks, but no thanks for that bridge to nowhere up in Alaska. If our state wanted a bridge, we were going to build it ourselves.
Again, she said that twice today. The problem is that every major news organization that has looked at this has reported that, in fact, Palin's claim is false. For example, here's exactly what the Wall Street Journal said today. Quote, she endorsed the multi-million-dollar project during her gubernatorial race in 2006. And while she did take part in stopping the project after it became a national scandal, she did not return the federal money. She just allocated it elsewhere. How much money? About $300 million that Palin kept in Alaska. And speaking of money, today the Washington Post reported that in Palin's first 19 months in office, she billed taxpayers in Alaska for 312 nights she spent in her own home. According to the story, Palin charged the state a per diem allowance that was intended to cover meals and incidental expenses while traveling on state business. A spokesman for the governor's office says that such charges are not unusual, but spokesmen for other gubernatorial offices say it is. Again, combined with the ongoing ethics probe into whether Palin abused her office and the firing of the person in charge of the state trooper, the danger in all of this for the McCain campaign is that Sarah Palin could get tagged by voters as just another politician, as opposed to the maverick that Sarah Palin and John McCain are trying to introduce to voters. In the meantime, Barack Obama was asked about Sarah Palin today, and he acknowledged that so far she has helped the McCain ticket.
There is no doubt that Governor Palin attracted a lot of attention this week. She's been on the minds of all of you, and as a consequence has been before the American people constantly for the last week, and has brought excitement to the Republican Party. There's no doubt about that. I think that what we're going to have to do is to see how things settle out over the next few weeks when people start examining who's actually going to deliver on the issues that people care about.
Sarah Palin has one more event, and that's in Virginia before she will head back to Alaska tomorrow. And then she has invited ABC News, Chris, to sort of follow her around for 2 days for an interview that could air as early as Friday. Chris?
Thank you, David Schuster. Jill Zuckman broke this story that Governor Palin was McCain's running mate for the Chicago Tribune. Congratulations. It's always great to break those stories. And James Grimaldi just returned from Alaska and has a story about Palin in today's Washington Post. James, get me straight on this, because I think I got it wrong in the last segment. She charged the state a per diem, per day, expenses for like meals and travel, while she was, living at home in Wasilla? Or, that's right, is that it?
Yes, that's exactly right. Now, her duty station would be in the state capital of Juneau. And so technically when she went to Wasilla, she was, on travel. But the fact is she was commuting 45 miles to the south to work in the governor's Anchorage office. At the time, she was accepting this approximately $60 a night per diem. And essentially, I don't know about you, but I don't get a per diem to stay in my own home.
Well, could she say, just to give her side, could she be taking that money to pay for gas?
Well, I don't know about you, Chris, but I also don't get mileage for driving to work.
Okay, well, I'm not governor of a state, and neither are you.
No, I'm not.
But let me ask you, do you think you've got pay dirt here? In other words,
no.
Is this a game changer? Would a person be expected to vote or not vote for Governor Palin based upon the importance of this report, that she was grabbing per diem money on a somewhat flimsy notion that she's busy, even at home? Or?
She's technically certainly on the money in terms of what she filed, and therefore I think this could be a chink in the armor of Joan of Arc. But it's certainly not going to, diminish her in the view at all of her supporters. I mean, right now she looks like a freight train.
Yeah, what about the $43,000 you point out that she got for travel?
Yeah.
Is that legitimate? I mean, we're really going through her pocketbook here for money, making sure everything, the paper, the chits are all right and the receipts are all there.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what we do here, is sort of a late vetting. Is that fair and square that she was receiving $43,490 to travel from the state to other parts of the state?
There are two standards. There's Sarah Palin's standard, and then there's her predecessor. Sarah Palin has held herself beyond reproach, Caesar's wife sort of thing. And so to the extent that she's flying around, I can tell you, I heard from people in the state who were very surprised to see these numbers, $10,000 for her daughter Piper, who's 7, to fly back and forth, thought it was a lot more and that she was smarter than that, especially since she's campaigning on this above-the-fray type of a campaign. But look at who she's comparing herself to, Chris. Her predecessor was Frank Murkowski, and Frank Murkowski had a much steeper and higher bill when it came to travel. I mean, Frank Murkowski's wife in 2006 spent much more than the Todd, the husband, and the 3 daughters did in the 19 months that she's been in office. So compared to Frank Murkowski, she still comes out with a much lower expenditure. But in terms of whether or not it meets the smell test, people who are looking for something to call her on probably have reason to ask questions. Is it really legitimate to charge a per diem when you're staying in your own house?
Okay, let me ask you about some other things. This whole thing about whether there is an ethics investigation going on her. It costs about $100,000 to invest. It's about whether she was right in firing a commissioner, a safety commissioner, because he wouldn't fire her ex-brother-in-law, who she apparently did or did not want fired. What's the crime there, or the ethics problem there?
Well, the question is whether she pressured the police commissioner to fire the ex-brother-in-law, which gets into all sorts of conflict of interest things. But it's hard to see regular people getting too upset with her when they find out that the ex-brother-in-law, the state trooper, tasered her nephew.
Yeah,
his
the guy's a bad guy, and she's governor of the state, and she didn't tell the public safety commissioner about this person's manner of being or behavior in private life. Wouldn't she be deficient in her responsibility?
Well, you've got to think so, that if he would do that to his own
you can imagine if this guy went off and did something ghastly while in the line of duty, and the governor said, well, I wanted to keep it a family matter, then she'd be in trouble for that.
Right. I think it's probably to her benefit that they've expedited that investigation so they can get it wrapped up and put to bed.
What do we make of this, James? And I don't want to be an elitist, because not everybody has the money to travel nor the opportunity to travel. But the fact that she's governor of a state, she's really only been overseas once. Is that an issue of any significance to the fact that she may well be seeing a lot of the world in about 3 or 4 months if she's VP? Well,
I'm sure it's going to be brought up as an issue. She did go overseas, but she met with John McCain, according to travel records, I think in Alaska in March, if the records are to be believed. She talked to General Petraeus as well during the course of the year. She looks like she was being looked at and has been thinking about these issues for some time. I have a feeling she might be better prepared. But I want to go back to the the Troopergate issue, because I actually think you're missing a point here, that these allegations against that trooper all were known well and before the trooper divorced the governor's sister. In fact, they weren't investigated and brought up until after the fact, and before she became governor, it had already been adjudicated. The guy had been disciplined for 5 days. Then she goes into the governor's office after the case is closed, asks her commissioner to look at it. He says, sure, I'll take a look at it. He looks at it and says, We've investigated it. He's been disciplined. There's nothing else we can do. Yet she continued to harp on it, along with having 3 cabinet members, well, we're not sure why they called, but 3 cabinet members actually gave this commissioner a call, and she sent 2 emails that really castigated this guy. Was he, you know, a model trooper? No, he wasn't a Boy Scout. On the other hand, the case was closed, and the family seemed to be very obsessed by this case after the fact. That might be a technical violation of Alaska law. It may not become a campaign issue in the national scope because of the reasons that both you and Jill just said.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jill Zuckerman. As ever, thanks for joining me. If you have any new stuff, James,